Peace, loves. Thank you so much for joining me here in this moment. My name is Christina. So, I was given a creation story when I was a child that was told through the lens of Christianity. I grew up in a Baptist church and I just grew up singing and dancing, traveling, all in the name of Jesus. I was learning stories of Adam and Eve. I was learning stories of Noah and the ark. I was learning stories of Jesus. And I just remember always being so intrigued by these stories and just so excited about God. I always had this strong presence within me that I called God and was able to really express this energy that I was feeling inside in church. It wasn't until a close cousin of mine that I grew up with started to question some of the stories that were being shared to us. And it was at that moment of her questioning these stories and going to our minister and asking questions that I even came to the awareness of questioning the stories and even thinking about putting these things into perspective, because we started to realize that these are stories. And it was a very interesting experience. Um, After that experience, continued to go to church. And I remember when I was in college, my freshman year, I had access to so many of my favorite things. Um, so many of my favorite things. And I remember by my second semester of college, I gained roughly 30 pounds. 30 pounds. And I just knew that I needed to become more consistent in my practices, become more disciplined. I knew that I had to change the way that I was eating because I wasn't feeling good and I personally wasn't looking good. And so started to learn more about fruits and vegetables. Already had experience with um, being pescatarian, which is I had went through a period of time where I was only eating seafood and fruits and vegetables and rice and beans and things of that nature. So I started to look more into the concept of veganism because it had to do with um, no animal food consumption. And at the time, I had came across this woman on the internet who was promoting this fruit-based lifestyle where you you know don't have to think about even managing your weight because the food does that for you. And so it was the first time that I was able to see life out of the scope from the scope away from the scope of dieting. Because growing up in diet culture, everyone's dieting. Everyone's mom is on a diet, every couple of months. And it just seems like dieting is a part of the culture versus actually having a culture of food that keeps people in shape and people healthy. So during that time, I started to really dive deep into how food impacted culture, specifically the culture that I come from. So, some people from my culture believe that our culture was birthed through slavery. And I say this because sometimes I feel like we don't have the conscious awareness that our existence predates slavery, and telling by our copper colored skin, ebony skin, we've been here for a minute to get sun kissed. We've been here for quite a long time to get kissed by the sun and to develop this hue. So we have a culture in regard to the way that we consume food that is set up to oppress us, that is set up to cause us harm, because our culture's food shouldn't be leading us to the grave. It shouldn't be giving us cancer and just different health issues and things of that nature. Our culture's food should allow us to feel lively. It should amplify and edify our lives. It should bring us together. It should be inclusive and not separating. And so, yeah, I just dived really deep during that time into how the food affects the culture as I was transitioning and wanting to do something healthy for myself and do something different. Because it's one thing to try to do what everyone else is doing and it's obviously not working. The dieting is obviously not working. The restricting is obviously not working. And then on top of that, it's not even about just losing weight. It's also about how I feel in my body. And so once you start to do the research, you come up with different ways and you start to experiment. You start to see what actually works for you. So around this time, I started getting these video suggestions in regard to how Christianity was used as a tool to oppress Blacks during slavery. And so going back to this creation story idea that I'm talking about today, once I started getting those suggestions, I started to go deep. I started to go so deep because it's just a different idea. And honestly, it's like this curiosity that springs up within you, because at the time I felt like I always knew God. Like I always had a knowing that God is inside of me. And I just was starting not to resonate with stories. Stories, books, and things that people were sharing from their mouth. And these video suggestions were basically feeding that spirit within me. It was feeding it because now I have this counter information. Now I have a different perspective to view something from, when I only had the perspective of what I was grown in. And so once I came across that, and then also during this time I was meeting other people, by that time I'm an adult, I'm in the workforce, I'm in school, so I'm meeting so many different people from so many different backgrounds and religions, and I'm getting to know different people and their mannerisms and just how they show up in the world, and just seeing how people's beliefs aligned with how they showed up and how they presented themselves, and just the impact that they were making on the world. And there was a lot of inspiration that came from that, because at this time I got to dive deep into other people's creation, other cultures' creation story. And so, yeah, it's been about 7 years of just diving into creation stories, diving into schools of thought in regard to astrology, human design, gene keys, different personality tests, different ways to assess your creation, who you are, even body break, Ayurvedic medicine, like even your body composition, all of these different things. And I feel that in order to know where we're going, we really have to know where we're coming from. And we have to know where we're coming from as it relates to our genesis, the original mother and father, and then also where we're coming from as it relates to different points and times, because these different points and times can greatly impact our culture. And we see that when it comes to the children of the diaspora. And yeah, so we have to be able to see ourselves holistically and utilize that as a tool to guide us forward. And so, my idea, now we're here. So, this is my idea of the creation story. It didn't begin with Adam and Eve. It didn't begin with a big bang or when God split open the heavens and said, "Let there be light." It didn't begin with slavery, being taken from our lands and separated. It didn't begin with that. It begins with you. It begins with your words, your everyday actions, your experiences. It begins with you. It begins with you. And I believe that it's important for us to have some type of spiritual roots, in regard to where we come from, the non-physical aspect, of our creation. And I also feel that it's important for us to recognize that we are our creation story. And it is we who are creating. We are aligning with this life force energy, and we are creating our stories. We are creating our stories, and we're aligning with other people and their stories, and so we're co-creating in these different stories. So this awareness, now that you have the conscious awareness that you are the creator in the story, creating the story using life force energy, now that you have the conscious awareness, you must be aware of your thoughts. You must be aware of your actions. You must be aware of your words. And the beautiful thing about creating a creation story is that you can create a winnable game. When we are not aware of the creation story, the original creation story, we start to accept anything that life brings to us. We start to say God's will. God's will lives in us. In the moment that we decide we want more, we can actually have more. We don't have to settle for what comes to us. It's so beautiful to be able to initiate what it is that you desire in life. It's so beautiful to put yourself in a space to receive something greater, a different story. You don't have to settle for what shows up. You can say no, and you can open yourself to more. So the creation story starts with you. What do you want your life to look like? What do you want your relationships to look like? What do you want your friendships to look like? What do you want your living situation to look like? What do you want your, what do you want, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel inside? Like, what type of energy do you want to have? What type of energy do you want to embody? What type of energy do you want to exude and share with the world? Who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? These things, I feel for some people, can be a forbidden fruit coming from what we perceive as our culture. But as I shared in the beginning, where I'm talking about the impacts on our culture as it relates to how food impacts our culture, I want to dive deeper, because food can be a holistic thing. food can be energy that you receive from other people, like anything that you just consume, and we have to actually consume things that are nourishing to our being. We have to have food for the soul, food for the mind, food for the spirit. So when we curate our lives, we really have to curate them so that we can win. What type of people do we need to surround ourselves around so that we can win? And it's not necessarily them pushy people. I need an accountability partner. Sometimes we need chill people in our Sometimes we need people who genuinely could just be our friends. Like, we don't need a coach. We just need friends. We just need family. Who are we calling family? Like, how are the people closest to us? Like, how are we loving them? And how do we feel as we receive their love? And what are we doing? Like, how are we taking care of ourselves? How are we sustaining ourselves? When it comes to how we get our resources, in what ways do we go about getting our resources? Is there a sense of justice? Is there a sense of integrity? Is there a sense of you just feeling that it's in alignment with who you are? These things are so important because as we're creating our lives, we really have to take a holistic approach, because you don't want any holes in your boat. Like, one hole in the boat can just be a disaster. You might be able to plug it, but like, we don't even want to get to that space. So the creation story begins with you. What do you want your life to look like? I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and I'm like, depending on how you grow up, if you grow up in a situation where maybe you have a parent or a sibling that you're just like, oh my gosh, like someone that you have to live with, that you feel like you are forced to live with because this is family, I feel like that can kind of program you in a way that when you become an adult, you kind of hold on to like people that you're just tolerating their energy. And it's just like, when we become adults, we choose, and we have to stop picking poison. We have to pick medicine that's good and healing and stuff like that. And we have to get out of these mind states of like, there having to be some challenge all the time, or there has to be some problem all the time, or there has to be some resistance all the time, like choosing people who just cause so much friction. And we can actually choose people that are just, it's easy, it's easeful. And I don't want to get too deep into that, because y'all can see I'm passionate about it, because it's something that I'm working through. And I'm still going through these motions. So with these ideas that I share with you, I'm still implementing them. I'm still reminding myself that I'm choosing. That's the beautiful thing about a creation story. Your creation story is that when you wake up in the awareness that you're creating your story, and that it is you who's choosing and deciding and calling the shots, that once you receive what it is that your heart desires or what you want, you work for that thing. Once you receive that, I feel will have a sense of fulfillment in knowing that I created this. Even if you didn't get the outcome that you wanted, it's still good to know that I created this. Because if I could create it, I can create something else. I can change it. Versus just not holding yourself accountable for your creation, maybe allowing something else to take over, and just not being responsible for your creations, and allowing life to just happen, and not getting what you want. And it's like, at the end of the day, we're choosing that. So it's like, when you don't get what you want, you're choosing to not get what you want. And so it's because now that I'm saying it out loud, you have the conscious awareness, and those moments where you're not getting what you want, that you're choosing that. And I think there's power in that too, like, you know, especially as it relates to you relating to someone else. I think there's power in being able to acknowledge that, like, hey, you know, I'm not getting what I want, and like just having to navigate getting what you want, and also compromise or sacrifice, and yeah, like figuring out what's worth it in this life. And I will say one thing: you are worth it, because you know it's you and your body having your experience, and it's gonna continue to be you and you no matter what happens outside of you, external of you. People are gonna come and go, and so it's so important for you to love life and love yourself, love that God within you even more, and put that God that is within you first, and listen to that God that is within you first, and exalting that God that is within you. And I think that everything's going to be all right. So, yes, thank you for joining me. Peace.